Definition of culture. Culture can be defined as all the ways of life, including arts, beliefs, and institutions of population that are passed down from generation to generation. Culture has been called the way of life for an entire society. As such, it includes codes of manners, dress, language, religion, rituals, art, etc. Definition of language. Language, a system of conventional spoken, manual signs, or written symbols by means of which human beings, as members of a social group and participants in its culture, express themselves. Definition of translation. Translation is a mental activity in which a meaning of given linguistic discourse is rendered from one language to another. It is the act of transferring the linguistic entities from one language into their equivalents into another language. Translation is an act through which the content of a text is transferred from the source language into the target language. Relationship between culture and translation. Translation is a converting process that helps people who speak other language to understand one another. It helps to connect cultures and eradicate the cultural difference that may be present. The translation is important to both language and culture because it enables better communication between two people. Generation consideration in culture words translation. Translation is vital in understanding ideas from another culture, and it is important that culture considerations be integrated into the process of translating content. There are different opinions regarding the relationship between language and culture, including the question of whether language is a part of culture. It is a different story, however. What is important to realize is that culture and language are interconnected. Cultural factors in various things, from literacy to art, dialect and language, religion, ideologies, and syntax. As you know, there are different forms of translation. In location, for example, the translators must consider that culture difference, whether it is minor or major, even in neighboring countries that could be very similar in many ways.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. So now I will explain about common problems of non-equivalence. The first is culture-specific concept. Such language words can express a concept that is completely unknown in the target culture. The concept in question may be abstract or concrete, may be related for religious belief, social customs, or even types of food. For example, of abstract concept in Indonesian that is difficult to translate into other language is the one with the word privacy. This is a very British concept and rarely encountered by people from other culture. Example of a concept is airing a cupboard in English, which is unknown to most speakers of the language. The second is the concept of the search language is not lexical in the target language. Search language words can express a concept that is known in the target culture, but not lexically. There is not allocated target language words to express it. Standard adjectives meaning ordinary, nothing extra, as in standard product, also express concepts that are very accessible to most people, but Arabic has its equivalents. The third is search language words are semantically complex. search language words are semantically complex, this is a fairly common problem in translation. Words do not have to be morphologically complex to be semantically complex. In other words, a word consisting of one morpheme may be able to express a more complex set of meanings than the whole sentence. An example of a semantically complex word is aruco, a Brazilian word that means to clear the soil under the coffee tree from your bag and to peel it up. The fourth is the search language and the target language make different meanings. The target language may make more or less difference in meaning than the search language. For example, Indonesians discriminate between going out when it rains without knowing it will rain or kehujanan, and going out when it rains knowing will rain, hujan-hujanan. English does not make this difference, with the result that if the English text daily refers to goes out in the rain, the Indonesian translator may have difficulty choosing the correct equivalent, unless the context makes it clear whether the person in question does not know that it's raining. And then the fifth is the target language has no superdeonate. The target language may have special words or hyponyms, but no common words or superordinates to lead the semantic field. Brennan 1999 discussed various interesting examples that show the types of difficulties faced between English and English in language or BSL. An ongoing problem for translators is that speakers often use common English terms for which BSL has no direct equivalent. Some examples of common English equivalent: touch, hit, murder, assault, and hold. Whereas the English word hit does not specify how a person is hit. For example, with a flat hand, fist, back of the hand. And the last is where a person is hit. For example, on the face, hip, leg, and back. Maybe that's all from me. I'm sorry for any mistake. I hope you can understand. So thank you very much.
Okay, I will continue the material. F. The target language lacks a specific term or hyponym. More commonly, languages tend to have general words or superordinates, but less specific words or hyponyms, since each language makes only those distinctions in meaning which seem relevant to its particular environment. There are endless examples of this type of non-equivalence in other languages. For example, feature, survey, report, critique, commentary, and many more. G. Difference in physical or interpersonal perspective. Physical perspective may be of more importance in one language than it is in another. Physical perspective has to do with where things or people are in relation to one another or to a place as expressed in pairs of words such as come or go, take or bring, arrive or depart, and so on. H. Difference in expressive meaning. The difference may be considerable or it may be subtle but important enough to pose a translation problem in a given context. It is usually easier to add expressive meaning than to subtract it. Differences in expressive meaning are usually more difficult to handle when the target language equivalent is more emotionally loaded than the search language item. This is often the case with items which relate to sensitive issues such as religion, politics, and sex. I. Differences in form. There is often an equivalent in the target language for a particular form in the search text. Certain suffixes and prefixes which convey propositional and other types of meaning in English often have no direct equivalents in other language. affixes which contribute to expressive or evocative meaning. For instance, by creating buzzwords such as vegetarian, carpetaria, and groceteria. J. Differences in frequency and purpose of using specific forms. English uses the continuous ing form for bending clauses much more frequently than other languages which have equivalents for it. For example, German and the Scandinavian language, consequently rendering every ing form in an English search text with an equivalent ing form in a German, Danish, or Swedish. Target text will result in a styled natural style. K. The use of loanwords in the source text. The use of loanwords in the source text poses a special problem in translation. Quite apart from their respective professional meaning, loanwords such as au, pipe, church, aus, said, and al fresco in English are often used for their prestige value, because they can add an air of sophistication to the text or its subject matter.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Hafsa and I'm going to explain about contextual factors for the translation process. Okay, the contextual factors for the translation process include: the first is purpose of the text. The purpose of the translation text is one of the important activities to support human communication. This is because the language used by humans is different in each region and country, so that not everyone will understand that we say. Therefore, there is a need for translation to help us communicate with people who have different language with us. The second is motivation and cultural, technical, and linguistic level of readership. Studying motivation, it is interesting because we can find out who we are, why we want the things we want, and how to improve the quality of our lives. In addition, motivation it is also good in planting talents, developing creativity, and developing interest. Meanwhile, language is an inseparable aspect of a particular culture. In other words, language is a product of culture itself. Culture is a part of human life that is reflected in everyday life either through words, action, or certain habits. So that the influence of motivation on culture is that it is possible to know the traditional culture and art of other region. The goals is to foster a spirit of sustainability in the natural and cultural environment. The third is importance of reference in SL text. Reference is search of reference or search of evidence. Reference is also referred to as a search of information of a work that contains fact or useful information. In translating, it is very important to have references because it shows parts of writing that are taken from certain sources. Avoid plagiarism, help readers to find references search used, and given a word to other authors who are used as references search. Okay, so the purpose of reference is: the first is it shows parts of writing that are taken from certain sources. References are used as supporting material for an argument or theory put forward in writing. That is, in a written work written by an author. It must contain information in the form of a statement that can be strengthened and proven from the references written in it. The third is helps readers to find reference sources used. Another purpose of references is as an additional reference in the article to provide more in-depth information to the reader about the topic. This is because With a reference, the reader can dig a variety of further information deeper and in accordance with the topic of discussion. And the last is gives awards to other authors who are used as reference sources. In addition to strengthening and also confirming a statement in an argument in a written work can also be used as a form of appreciation for the work of others. This is because the previous writers or researchers have spent a lot of time, thought, and energy to make an article based on valid and accountable information. Therefore, it is appropriate for the author or other people who use the work or other people before to be able to explain where the source of the reference he or she got as a form of appreciation for the previous author. Okay, maybe that's all about from me. Thank you.
Okay, the first is ecology. Geographical features differ from other cultural terms in that they are usually value-free, both politically and commercially. Nevertheless, their diffusion depends on the importance of their country of origin as well as their degree of specificity. Many countries have local words for plains, like prairies, steppes, pampas, savannas, llanos, campos, páramos, bush, field, and all with strong element of local color. The second is material culture. For material culture, food is for many the most sensitive and important expression of national culture. Food terms are subject to the widest variety of translation procedures. Various settings like menus, cookbooks, food guides, tourist brochures, journalism increasingly contain foreign terms. For example, for English, other food terms are in different category, like macaroni came over in 1600, spaghetti in 1880, ravioli and pizza are current. Many other Italian and Greek terms may have to be explained. Food terms have normally been transferred, only the French making continuous effort to naturalize terms like roast beef or choucroute. The third is social culture. In considering social culture, one has to distinguish between denotative and connotative problems of translation. Thus, charcuteria, capellaria, chocolateria, conditoria hardly exist in Anglophone countries. There is rarely a translation problem since the words can be transferred, have approximate one-to-one translation, or can be functionally defined, like hardware, cake, chocolate shop, or cake shop with cafe. But as a translation problem, this contrasts with the connotative difficulties of words like the people, the common people, the masses, the working class, the working classes, and the lower orders, classes, inferiores. I'm Nurikma Malik and I'm going to continue the material, and it's about social organization, political and demonstrative, historical terms, international terms, religious terms, artistic terms, and the last is gestures and habits. The first is social organization, political and administrative. The political and social life of a country is reflected in its institutional terms, where the title of a head of state like president or king, or the name of a parliament like Assemblée Nationale is transparent. That is made up of international or easily translated morphemes they are through translated National Assembly. Names of ministries are usually literally translated provided they are appropriately descriptive. Therefore, Treasury becomes Finance Ministry, Home Office becomes Ministry of the Interior, or Defense Ministry becomes Ministry of National Defense. Translation such as social domain and exchange domain should be replaced by social affairs and trade. The problem occurs when the target language does not have the appropriate equivalence for the words in the search. Next is historical terms. In the case of historical institutional terms such as Procureur General, Le Grand Siècle is not to translate whether the translation makes sense or not, unless they have generally accepted translation. For example, in popular text, the transferred word can be better placed by a functional or descriptive term. Next is international terms. International institutional terms usually have recognized translation that are factual true translation and are now commonly known by their acronyms. The term international has a meaning that has been patented, so for its application, it can use terms in the form of acronyms, meaning that the acronyms are known to certain people just by looking at them. For example, in English, and becomes quasi-internationalism, which is not always resisted in French, like UNICEF, UNESCO, FAO, UNRRA. Next is religious terms. In religious language, the activities of Christianity, particularly the Catholic Church and the Baptists, are reflected in manifold translation. The language of the other world religions tends to be transferred when it becomes of TL interest, the commonest word being naturalist. And artistic terms. The translation of artistic terms referring to movements, process, and organization generally depends on the putative knowledge of the readership. Names of buildings, museums, theaters, opera houses are likely to be transferred as well as translated, since they form part of street plans and addresses. For example, Art Nouveau in English and French becomes Jugendstil in German and Style Liberty in Italian. The last is gestures and habits. For gestures and habit, there is a distinction between description and function that can be made in ambiguous situation. Gesture and habit are included as categories because they differ from one culture to another. For example, if people smile a little when someone dies, kiss their fingertips to greet or to praise, and give a thumbs up to signal okay, all of which occur in some cultures and not in others. I think that's all from me.
The first procedure in translating cultural word is transference. It is the process of transferring a search language word to a target language word as a procedure of translation. It includes transliteration, which relates to the conversion of different alphabets, for example, Russian, Greek, Arabic, and so on into English. The word then becomes a loan word. It includes transliteration and is the same as what is called transcription. The example is the word halal in Arabic, which is also translated into halal in English. The second procedure is cultural equivalent. It intends replacing a cultural word
in the search language into cultural target language word but not really accurate. The example of this procedure is the word gado-gado in Bahasa Indonesia, which is translated into salad in English. The third procedure is neutralization. Neutralization is a kind of paraphrase at the level of word. When the search language item is generalized or neutralized, it is paraphrased with some culture-free words. In explanation of search language cultural item, there is two elements. One is descriptive and another one would be functional. Descriptive equivalent talks about size, color, and composition. In this procedure, the meaning of the search language word is explained in several words. The example is the Indonesian food seblak, which is explained as a Sundanese dish made of wet kerupuk cooked with protein sources in spicy sauce. The functional equivalent talks about the purpose of the search language cultural specific word. In this procedure, a culture-free word is used. Therefore, it generalizes the search language word. The example of this procedure is wayang in Bahasa Indonesia is translated into puppet in English. A literal translation is the next procedure. Literal translation is a translation that keeps the original content without changing structure, form, or style. It is done by translating each word separately, without looking at how the words are used together in a phrase or sentence, or without paying attention to the meaning of the text as a whole. The example is the English idiom, kill two birds with one stone, which is literally translated into membunuh dua burung dengan satu batu in Bahasa Indonesia. The actual meaning of this idiom is to achieve two things by doing a single action, or melakukan dua hal sekaligus dalam satu waktu. The fifth procedure is label. Label is a temporary translation of the search language word. The translator considers this procedure usually as the appropriate one to translate a new institutional term, which should be made in inverted commas, which can be later be discreetly withdrawn. It could be done through literal translation. For example, heritage language is translated become language the heritage. The next procedure is naturalization, which is a strategy when a search language word is transferred into target language text in its original form. It conforms the search language word first to the normal pronunciation, then to the normal morphology. The example of this procedure is target in English, which is translated into target in Bahasa Indonesia.
Okay, the next I will explain about component shell analysis, feature analysis, or contrast analysis. Is the analysis of word through structure sets of semantic features which are given as present, absent, or interferent with reference to feature. The method thus departs from the principle of compositionality. Componential analysis is a method typical of structural semantics which analyzes the component of a word meaning. Thus, it reveals the culturally important feature by which speaker of the language distinguish different words in a semantic field or domain, according to Ottermine 2006. Okay, the next is deletion. Deletion is the removal of a word or part of source language text in target language because the word or part of source language is not as important in target language because it is difficult to translate. Example, source language, dia tinggal dengan kakek buyutnya. And in target language, we only translate to she lives with her grandfathers. We don't need to translate the word of buyut. The next is couplets. It occurs when the translator combines two different procedures. The couplet procedure is a combination of two translation procedures applied in determining the equivalence in the target language, the integration of the two procedures. Here is a combination of couplets. The first is transportation and modulation, the next is additional explanation and modulation, and the last is descriptive translation and transportation.